All right. Greetings, fellow Earthlings. Welcome to the Great Debate Community Channel. I'm your host, John Peterson. This is a channel brought to you by Steve McCrae, and I want to thank Steve for allowing me to do this, as always. Today, we are going to talk about an event that took place in London last night called Atheists Assemble. And we have two attendees with us today, and hopefully one of the organizers will be joining us shortly. And Dr. Misha Griffith has been sent a link, and she said that she would join us, but maybe not be here right on time. One here right on time. Getting a little feedback there. If you could mute listening to the broadcast. And I'd just like to point out, because I've had some issues with my computer and had to find a new way to stream after they got rid of Google Hangouts. By the way, fuck you, Google. So I threw this together kind of in short order, and so I don't have a feature channel this week. David, do you have a YouTube channel?
I do.
And what is the name of your YouTube channel?
It's just the same. It's David Worley.
David Worley. And so what we will do is, and I didn't ask David about this beforehand, but surprise, surprise, David Worley is my feature channel this week. Oh. We usually start every broadcast with a feature channel, and just a few quick questions for you. So what type of content do you have on your channel, David?
Firstly, before I answer that, I'll happily defer to Kelly because Kelly's got a lovely channel.
Oh, well, Kelly has already been a feature channel in the past.
Oh, don't bother about her then. No, it doesn't matter. Because we were joking about this earlier. She was at the event yesterday. She was going to put her hand up very reluctantly, sort of like going like this, and then she would just retract her hand straight away. And then I was joking that I would actually get my question in just because I just put my hand up once, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Dave." Same happened here. But yeah, sorry. So my channel really aims to try and map the social network of the atheist community. That it also does include agnostics. And I've had Steve McCrae on. I've had a plethora of people. It's difficult. It's harder to say who I haven't had on. And that's just a free talking podcast, just like this one. I don't know why Kelly's laughing. Kelly's already been on. She's going to be on Tuesday. She's very, very nervous about it. I was talking to Faye, actually, who might be joining us, and she said that you told Faye to watch out. You warned her about my channel. There's nothing wrong with it. What was that about?
No. I didn't mean about your channel. I meant about you.
What did I do?
I'm sure we can explain it in some length at another time as to why we have the relatively harmless banter that we have. He's a Remainer.
She's a leaver.
A leaver. That must be some UK lingo that I'm not familiar with. She's a leaver.
It's regarding Brexit. Yeah. So yeah, our pooch screw situation over here. That's our biggie thing at the moment. But we're playful about it, you know. It is a pooch screw.
Is that a phrase?
Pooch screw.
Can I just clarify? That's not a phrase from down south.
That's not
a phrase from up north.
Well, yes, and as you pointed out before we went live, Kelly is a northerner. I'm not sure what that means in the UK world, but you did say that quite pejoratively when you mentioned it. So,
John, you must understand that he's having you on. He's pulling your leg. Do not basically anything to do with me. Don't pay attention. He's good at what he does.
Is David taking a piss? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, that's exactly what he's doing. He's taking a piss. He's taking a piss.
I'm telling the truth. That's what I'm doing.
Factually, you're not, because I'm not northern.
So
you can't disprove me.
Let the man get on with his job.
Sorry, John.
No, you're okay. As far as your channel goes, same as your name, David Worley, and your content revolves around like the social connections in the atheist community, basically.
So I could try and elaborate a bit more. So I've got into the habit of describing my channel using Neil the 604 Atheist channel as like the first go-to. So he does deconversion stories. I do everything apart from that. Does that make sense? Okay. So I, as like a cradle atheist, as somebody who's been an atheist their whole life, feels like I don't have this baggage attached to me emotionally, like some people doing a particular apostates do. And as such, I feel like I don't have to spend so much time dealing with that. And I instead, I prefer to go into futurism. So the last podcast I did was with Barnick Dance, and she's obviously very 80s sort of driven, and her artwork and her styles and video games. So we're just talking to each other about video games. And we started at 80s video games. We then started about today's video games. And then we started to talk about the future and how virtual reality and augmented reality is coming in. And there's very interesting sort of dystopian ideas to do with like Black Mirror, if anyone's watched that. And that's very interesting to me, when it can go wrong and be too realistic, or, you know, can be abused. And that's very interesting, a discussion to go on.
Yeah, the only thing wrong with Black Mirror is that it's too few episodes per series and too far between each series, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, that's an excellent show. I've watched every episode of that more than once. Same
goes for Sherlock, the UK version. At least they did like 3 1.5 hour episodes, I think it was, every couple of years. But if it's good quality, then I can't really complain.
Yeah, it just sucks though, because it's one of those ones that it comes out all at once, and then I end up consuming it rather quickly, and then I'm stuck waiting a year or 18 months to get to see the next one.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm in my 50s, and, you know, back in my youth and quite a bit, you know, into my life, you know, television programs would put out anywhere from 22 to, you know, 35 episodes per season. And now it seems like the quality is much better in television programming, but you're only getting, you know, often like 8 to 13 episodes per season. But I guess it's a trade-off. If you know, television wasn't as quality back when I was a young man. So onward to the topic discussion. As I said, both David and Kelly attended the Atheist Assemble event, and here we have Misha Griffith.
Sorry, I'm a little late. Hello.
And now magically we are 4-shot. Welcome, Misha.
I'm so sorry. The training went long.
No, that's okay. Meet David Worley and
Hi, David.
Kelly, Topic Thunder.
Hello.
Well, Kelly, you already know. You guys did a stream together. And now we were just going to get into it here. So to start with, I'll be talking to these folks, Misha, just to ask them about the event. And now, was this the first such event, or what annual Atheist Assemble was this?
Do you want to take this, David?
No, feel free.
Okay. Yeah, it was. As I understand it, it was set up to be a fairly small. It was a small idea that sort of grew as they Vidu and Mimsy, who are ex-Muslims, who have both have respective channels and are connected with people, great friends, people like Armin the Barbie and others, Zara K, that sort of thing. And Vidu was interviewing Cosmic Skeptic for his podcast, and they spoke about how it had evolved from being just a select few people, and it was sort of like an evening about being an ex-Muslim. And then, of course, as people became more available, and it being in the UK, and of course, Rationality Rules and people like that based in the UK, and then Drew, GM Skeptic, got involved as well. So it sort of grew from quite a small idea, and then people got attached to it. So really, it was not only a great event for what it was, but the fact that you managed to get all these people in the country at the same time. And that's not likely to happen again, probably until something like Faithless Forum. So it's sort of our Faithless Forum, because you guys had all our people over in April, I think it was. So
but this was the first one, though.
It was, yes. So, and it was
okay.
Yes, it was an evening with Vidu and Mimsy. That's how it was, sort of thing. And then it just sort of became Atheists Assemble, given the people involved. But it went so well that I think it definitely should be on next year, and they even sort of asked the crowd last night. One thing I would say is that I think it'd make a great day-long event, because there really wasn't enough time. They did it impeccably well, and they kept to timing and things like that. But I think it would just be really great as a sort of day-long, or even a weekend sort of conference type thing. But it was wonderful, very formal yet informal. Oddly, I'm sure David would agree, oddly situated and being hosted in a Arab-owned hotel in Kensington, which is a very posh borough in London. And so all the hotels are fabulous, but there was a large portion of the clientele walking around in hijabs. So it was very sort of like a juxtaposition of what we were talking about in this sort of conference room upstairs. But it was brilliantly executed, and the topics, although the speakers were kept short, they covered a lot of ground and expressed what they did. So yeah, it was really good. I think it was, I don't have a comparison because obviously I didn't attend Faithless Forum, but I can imagine it's very similar but less conferencey, I guess. There wasn't like set speakers and set speeches. It was more informal but formally.
Right. Well, and I saw on a tweet that David had put out, it was either the day of or maybe the day before, and he had a screenshot of all the different speakers that were there, and there was some pretty, heavy hitters from the community there to speak. I think Cosmic Skeptic was there, Rationality Rules, GM Skeptic, I can't remember who else, but
I can quickly run through them if you like.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. Obviously hosted by Mimsy Vidu, and then we had just left to right, Cosmic Skeptic, Zara K, Imtiaz Shams, Sadia Hamid, Armin Navabi, GM Skeptic, Mariam Namazi, Rationality Rules, and Jimmy Bangash.
And so how many people do you think were there? What was the attendance like?
I think the original number, we were all called, I'm sure David was as well beforehand, given the nature of the event, asked security questions and things like that. So we were called well before the event. And I think I asked Mimsy, and she said the capacity was around 150. And I think pretty much all the seats were taken. Of course, there was camera crews and things like that. So around about sort of 130 to 150, because the people kept moving around and stuff. But it was a nice number, but just not enough time, I would say. But so it wasn't a huge event, certainly not, but enough to make it quite exciting.
So it started at 6 o'clock UK time. How long did it run till?
Well, I think a lot of people had to leave 10 for the last train, so I think it went on past 11 o'clock. But myself and my husband had to leave round about 11:15. But there was still sort of photos being taken, and everybody was trying to get Alex to answer their questions as well, wandering around. So the space could have done with being a little bit bigger for that, because you were sort of ferrying around this like one section that you could walk towards the speakers, who are obviously at the front. So it was. So they were able to fill up the time with content, but in terms of the meet and greet side of it, it could have been a little bit longer for that. There just wasn't really enough time really to
So there was just one particular meeting. They didn't have breakout sections or anything like that.
No, they had sort of little intermissions, but 5 to 10 minutes, that sort of thing. And there was sort of refreshments on hand as well. So, so it wasn't great swathes of time and then they would stop. It would be sort of one section of talk stop and so on. And they had a quiz and other things. But yeah, could have just done with being perhaps an all-day thing and then spread out a little bit more.
Now, Dr. Misha, I know that, in your professional work, I'm sure you attend many, such conferences, but have you ever attended a meeting or a conference that was like atheist? Like, have you ever been to Faithless Forum or anything like that?
No, I've only been to academic seminars and some video production seminars, but no, I've never been to a meeting like this. So I find it totally fascinating.
Well, and it's. I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this. Kelly or David can correct me if I'm wrong. It would seem to me that the UK would be a good spot for such meetings, because as I've been told by some people who live in the UK, that atheists don't get as much, for lack of a better term, shit about being atheist in the UK as they do here in the United States. Yeah. Would you agree? Is that a correct statement, David?
I think in terms of David, ex-Muslims, they never get off the hook no matter where they are. They're perhaps slightly safer statistically in the UK, but it's relative, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how you feel, David, about it. I don't know whether you'd say the same thing.
Yeah, I get that impression from ex-Muslims that have come forward and said that. I mean, it's very compelling when you hear the stories that Armin comes out with every now and again. He'll tweet something about, if we don't hear from this person in 4 hours, we have to release this press statement. It's like, oh, shit, that I've never heard of this before. So as somebody who would have sort of joined this community, as it were, even though I've always been an atheist, about a year ago I would have joined, and so I've learned a lot more about the apostate side of that community. And as I said before, I don't have experience of being ridiculed, even so much as this even coming up in conversation. Like, all my friends are just atheists. Like, how many times do people talk about leprechauns? It's like, it's just not talked about at all. So there's hope.
Well, I mean, and speaking of like ex-Muslims, I mean, maybe not in the UK, but there's plenty of places in the world that, someone who comes from a Muslim background, if it were found out that they were atheists, they could be killed for that. Sure.
What was it they said last night? 13 countries atheists can be killed, 5 can be imprisoned. Yeah. 18 are at least, discriminating in some way, shape or form, and all of them are majority Muslim countries.
Is there anything, Misha, that you can say, historically speaking, about how atheists are treated in different parts of the world?
Honestly, it is really a 19th and 20th century phenomenon. It just wasn't a concept even before the latter part of the 19th century. It just was not done. It just was not announced. Even if one was, say, in the Age of Enlightenment in the later part of the 17th and the 18th century, they would consider themselves deists. It would just be completely unthinkable. Of course, in England, it has only been within the last, I think, 200 years that attendance at the Church of England was not compulsory. that there were fines issued for people who did not go to church. It wasn't a matter of, do I believe or not? It was a matter of, you are to be physically in church or you paid a fine.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so UK has turned around quite a bit.
Well, and as I pointed out earlier, that's okay. As I pointed out earlier, it seems that, it's turned around quite a bit and much more accepting of atheists than here in our country.
Oh, yeah.
And now, David, you ran through what speakers were there. Could you and Kelly take a few minutes and kind of fill us in as to what topics were discussed last night?
Yeah, I'll probably try and do it from memory. So the way it worked was they initially had everybody on the panel all at once. So all 9 of them were there with Mims and Vidu to one side. And 3 would speak at a particular time on a particular topic with back and forth questions from Mimsy and Vidu. And then they would open up questions from the rest of the panel. And they would do that 3 times for each of the groups of 3. Then at the end, there was a Q&A for all of the audience as well. So I think, if I get it right, there was the initial discussion was on the LGBT issues within Birmingham schools, and there was I think there was 1 or 2 that were named. I can't remember them exactly. I know that the headmaster was mentioned is Andrew. I can't quite remember the specific names. So Jimmy Bangash was on that, GM Skeptic, and Sadia Hamid, I couldn't remember her name, who were very good. I hadn't heard of the other 2. I'd heard of GM Skeptic before, but those 2 in particular were had very different styles, actually. I found Jimmy very sort of calm and very composed, and then Sadia was much more emotive and more visceral and passionate. Yeah, so there was very good balance on that particular talk. I don't know if we want to go through one each or how we want to do this.
Well, yeah. What topics do you remember being discussed? Topic.
Well, the one that did stand out for me was the LGBT issue, as it was fairly recent in the news. And it sort of harkens to a question that's just been asked in the live chat as to why people get together to.
I was just about to screen share that after you were done.
Yeah, why people get together who used to be something to talk about a fictional book because of stuff like that, because education and faith segregation. Yeah, it's not an old school thing. It still happens, and it was a quite the overreaction, I think, from the Muslim community, because they were making it out as if the children were going to be indoctrinated and things like that into a gay lifestyle, and the actual process that they were talking about is part of a national thing where they discuss about no outsiders. So it would have been about different sort of communities and subgroups and things like that, and to talk about inclusivity broadly. But this particular part of the term was regarding LGBT families, same-sex parents and things like that. And there was a minimal mention of this. There was no, as far as they expressed last night, and from what I remember about the news stories, there was no talk of sex education. They were quite young children, so they wouldn't have had that anyway. But it was just very much sort of blown out of proportion. Of course, they probably wouldn't think so. But being that obviously Sadia herself, she was very passionate about it, if I remember correctly. They were saying they're allowed to be upset about things like that and protest and they pulled their children out of the school. It was sort of a standstill situation. But we're not allowed to say that's wrong, because you're then creating this issue. Who gets marginalized, who gets attacked, and who gets bullied? The LGBT people. So you're saying that you want something your way because of your subgroup or your particular views and beliefs, but you're discounting the people that it could really hurt as well. So it is strange. That sort of question and that sort of idea came up a lot last night in terms of why do you do what you do? Well, we have to, because why should we be quiet when you're forcing change or attempting to force change in regards to social situations that everybody else, not everybody else believes the way you do.
Well, so, right, and if believers weren't trying to, push their ideology into the public sphere and try and affect legislation because of their beliefs, then it wouldn't be anything that we'd have to speak out against. But the fact is that they do. And just real quick, the comment that my apologies to Misha and David for covering up your faces with this comment here. But Dwayne Burke, the comment that he made was, why do people who lack belief in supposed fictional characters get together to discuss arguments against a fiction book? And let's let the other two guests give their thoughts on that comment. David?
Oh, no, go ahead, Misha.
Oh, okay. I think this has been a real drawback in the atheist and agnostic community from the get-go, is defining yourself by something you're not rather than something you are. There is not a positive claim there. And essentially, it's hard to say, well, I'm thinking about not thinking about this. And any good revolution, any good movement needs to have a set, not just a core beliefs, but a set of ideals to gain. And I don't think the atheist and agnostic community has been really good about creating a system of ideals. There's secular humanism, but you see very few people, get really excited about being a secular humanist. So I think this is a drawback. I think Dwayne's comment is, kind of dead on.
Well, and I think that if you, talking about atheists, talking about agnostics, I agree with your point. I would say that maybe anti-theists have a little bit more of a cohesive message, because anti-theists, for the most part, would probably like to do away with any religion in the public sphere at all.
Right, John, but you've got a lot of people in the agnostic and atheist camp who are not anti-theist.
Right, yeah.
They are what I call apatheist. They are apathetic to the question of, is there a God? They don't care. And if you're in that camp, you're not going to pick a side whatever way the wind is blowing. You're going to ignore it.
Yep. David?
Yeah, I'm really remembering certain things that were brought up in the conversation last night as well, where it was discussed. I think it was Sadia who mentioned how some things get mentioned by, let's say we took word for word what a male said, and then word for word what a female said. They say exactly the same thing, but the female gets so much more shit for saying it. And this blatant underlying current of sexism is prevalent in various different areas of society, but it is perpetuated from various different books, including the Quran. And I know Surah 434 got mentioned, that passage about how you can eventually justify beating your wife and that sort of thing. So why we, going back to that point about Dwayne's point, why do people who lack belief in supposed fiction codes get together to discuss arguments against a fictional book? It wasn't too much about the book. It was to do with what's justified in the name of religion. Mm-hmm. And the lack of proactiveness from within those communities to try and deal with certain issues. And that was one of them, the misogyny and various different things that get accused of us, like where do we get our morality from? And often we do, maybe we're in danger of saying we are morally superior, but in many cases we are. we just are, because we're not advocating for death. We're not advocating for imprisonment of homosexuals or anything like that, just on the basis of the way they are. And as such, the discussion then went into the R word, as it kept being mentioned, reform. And Armin was very vocal against the reform, because I think I'm right in saying when, please correct me if I'm wrong, when Catholicism was trying to be reformed, it then became Protestantism. It wasn't Catholicism. It wasn't Catholic anymore. And so
there was a schism.
Split.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a schism.
You couldn't call it the same anymore.
It was a revolution. I don't even like to call it a reformation, because that implies that the Catholic Church was wrong. Martin Luther stepped in, nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the church, and the church fixed itself. It was a far more complex process than that. It took many, many years. It created a group of Protestant churches forming, and then they started splintering up into their groups, Lutheranism, Calvinism, etc. And the Catholics, noting that for the first time in the church's history they had real competition, formed the Council of Trent, one of the most important of the Catholic councils in the 16th century, in which they literally put into place, over the course of 15 years, almost the exact reforms that Martin Luther asked for in the very beginning. But they had to impose that on themselves. They could not have it imposed from an outside source.
So like we don't like what you're saying, but then slowly they adopted it as if it was their own idea, basically.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, I'm simplifying the Council of Trent to a ridiculous aspect, but it in the end, the Catholic Church was far more responsive to the people, as opposed to more worried about keeping its structure and hierarchy solvent and moving forward.
Now, oh, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
I only wanted to say that my specialty is not in religion at all, and clearly Misha knows a lot more about it than I do. There was one bit that I remember Armin saying by I don't know whether it's it would be correct. There was also a discussion about this, whereby there's different styles of addressing people and being more aggressive or being softer and things like that. And so he described what we're talking about here about Reformation as replacing cancer with like cancer light. Like we still have the original problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's not getting rid of it.
About it.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact wording. You think might said AIDS
right.
or something, but yeah.
He used several different terms at one point, because somebody said, "Oh, Christianity was reformed," and he said, "No. Christians reformed themselves, but Christianity stayed the same. And even if you have Islam 2.0, you still have the original Islam to deal with." He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I think something along the lines of, it's fucking not true is basically what he said. Let's just deal with that. But it's strange, because obviously the event was called Atheists Assemble as sort of like a little sort of funny sort of take on, you know, other films with assemble things in it, but other terms. But it was a discussion mainly, I think, that what I sort of gathered from it was the resulting factors of what happens to ex-Muslims in particular when they do leave their faith, and the sort of charities and things set up, and how people can help, and what they do to enable people to sort of then live their lives once having been shunned by their whole communities, not just their families. So to me, although I'm interested in the sort of philosophical questions, and I suppose in a sense I'm lucky. When I first started my channel, I said to myself, I said, do I have the right to talk about this? I don't live in the Bible Belt. I'm wasn't raised religious. It's a curiosity, if anything. I was never oppressed due to religion. What right do I have to talk about it? And whilst I maintain the idea that it's obviously a phenomenon, and it's any idea is worth having a look at, it's last night just reminded me of the human aspect of the damage that can be done, and it's right in front of you, and it's being spoken by people with real pain in their voice, who, despite that, go up against these ideals and, you know, have the, pardon my French, but the balls to do it, and to knowing that, okay, you're in the UK and you may be able to speak a little bit more freely than in more theocratic countries, but then that doesn't really stop Armin. I don't think anything can stop Armin, but it's not just about the truth, the book, the dogma. It's affecting you and I. The humanist aspect is now just as important to me as just asking the questions. And it's strange because since becoming involved in this community, I have noticed the negative effects, even in the small area I live, in regards to religion, but also just how prevalent it is even in a fairly, I don't want to say secular country, because technically we do have quite a large amount of people who count themselves to be religious, whether Christian or otherwise. But your eyes become sort of, you know, a bit more aware of it. And I remember we were walking towards the hotel and there was a massive banner saying "Love never fails," and of course it referring to the Jehovah's Witness convention. And I just thought I never would have noticed that before. And of course, Lloyd Evans is doing work in regards to the abuse situations that, you know, the lawsuits and things that are happening about that. So, and he's an ex-JW. So if people don't talk about these things and raise the issues that are not on the periphery, but are involved in regards to whether or not it's true. Some people might just want to concentrate on the, you know, epistemological aspects of it and just sort of see it as a curiosity. But those things then create communities and issues beyond. So I think it's too broad a thing to say, why do you do this? Why can't you do something else? Why not? Why not help people?
Well, and I think that, you know, the blowback or the resistance that, you know, and the stigma attached to, you know, being an atheist, I think that keeps a lot of people of, you know, quote, coming out of the closet as atheists. I mean, there's many stories, you know, in the media, you know, or social media and on YouTube. I've seen videos where, you know, atheists, you know, share their stories about how, well, yes, I came out to my family as an atheist and they all disowned me. There's been, you know, younger atheists that have come out and their families have thrown them out of the house. You know, so when you live in a society that, you know, here in the United States that is vastly a majority of theists, it can cause some, you know, real problems in a person's everyday life. And so I think that even, you know, when you talk about the demographics of atheism, I suspect there are many more atheists out there than we recognize because of those factors. You know, because a lot of them are, you know, I mean, I would hazard a guess that there is some significant number of churchgoers, church with their family each week, that are just going through the motions. So, go ahead,
Jordan,
Misha.
My point would be that becoming an atheist or an agnostic is an extremely lonely journey. It's something that each person does according to their own conscience, which automatically leaves you out of community. And we so much want community that, as you say, John, just going along with going to church, there's an automatic community there. There's an automatic support system that some people are loath to give up. And, you know, we can't force them to do that. But when that community to individuals becomes hurtful, becomes something that denies them their own human rights, their own self-actualization, then maybe those communities need to be rethought.
Now, I haven't been to church in many decades, but I still remember when I was younger, that was one aspect of going to church that I say that I still miss, is the fellowship part of it. You become friends with people, and then I don't know how it works in other churches, maybe not so much maybe in the Catholic religion, but in the church I went to, often a few times a month after church services, where we would meet in the basement and have a potluck supper, and and everybody would just socialize, and that was always fun. So yeah, for certain people, that might be a tough thing to turn your back on, because you have a support group, you have people that you've known, and you don't want to lose that. I do want to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, and it has been the tradition in the United States, possibly in Britain, certainly in many other places in Europe, that the church is the milestone for certain aspects of your life. Baptism, marriage, death. For many people who don't step into a church on a regular basis, they're there for those occasions. Mm-hmm. And so that makes the church an important touchstone for intellectually and emotionally, especially emotionally, important times.
Hey, that brings up an interesting question. Now, I know that Kelly, you are married. David, are you married?
I'm not. I don't know why I kept getting asked that last night. I won't say who from, but
I think that maybe that they were looking at wrestler, and that's why they were asking you that.
Kelly, it's a massive compliment.
Well, and so the reason Misha made me think of this question. Now, when you were married, Kelly, now you're an atheist. Were you married in a church?
Oh, I've been pondering how to answer this question, and I realize no matter how I answer it, I'm going to come off terrible, but I cannot change facts. Yes, we married in church, which we did attend for several months beforehand. It was before, I'd say, it's 8 years ago now. So it was before I had this sort of more fervent push towards, I don't want to say towards atheism, because I was already an atheist, but become part of the community and obviously be a content creator and talk about it. So it was a very uncomfortable sort of position to be in, but the people were quite lovely. And some of the stories, like some other stories, were sometimes inspiring, sometimes questionable. It was led actually for several months while we were going by a lady vicar, so that was nice. But yes, I did, and we did feel obviously there in ourselves there was a sort of bit of hypocrisy, but we got involved in events and things, and became a little bit a part of their community, but we connected with people just on a normal level. We'd have sort of tea and biscuits afterwards, and it was very rarely discussed beyond the sermons and beyond the sort of the pews, as it were. We were just connecting as people, and so I think perhaps there's a more quaint aspect to church attendance in the UK as it is in America, but it wasn't such an odd situation, although it's not exactly what I'd prefer to do on a Sunday morning. But yes, so I know I'll probably come in for some flack for that.
Now, in church in the UK, when you take communion, is it a stout beer instead of a wine?
We wish.
Wouldn't that be fabulous? No, I don't. It's the sort of the Eucharist thing. I didn't feel comfortable doing that, because obviously that's pretty much that's quite full on. We just sat there, sang our hymns, said peace be upon you, and hugged and things like that. So
wait a minute. You felt uncomfortable partaking in something that symbolized human blood? I find that hard to believe.
Yes, yes. Well, I don't steer towards cannibalism, and I'm okay with that.
So, John,
Misha,
you don't have to
go
worry
ahead.
about that. Transubstantiation only starts happening after you have swallowed the substances.
Oh, okay.
It only
Now,
turns when it's on the way down.
Misha, were you and Jerry married in a church?
Yeah, but we were married almost 34 years ago. And so we both were church attending back then. I attended my grandparents' church. They were some of the founding members of this church in our little community. And I always had a very different relationship with the church, if only because, for one thing, it was a very, I'd like to say, milquetoast Methodist church, in that I remember as a kid, we were more interested in protesting the Vietnam War and collecting money for the Heifer Project than we were about, well, what does the Second Corinthians say? That was the intellectual part of digging into the scripture, was never part of my church upbringing. My grandmother was also a florist, so she provided the flowers, and my mom and my grandmother decorated the church, and we came along and helped. And my mom was in the choir, and so was I. So I sang in the choir for a long, long time. So I was one of the people being preached at every Sunday. But my intellectual path towards agnosticism is very recent for me. For me, I haven't been really intellectualizing it until very recently. So I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm still on that journey.
Well, okay. Now I want to touch on something here that I alluded to earlier. I can't remember whether it was during the broadcast or before we went, but pardon me. David tweeted out a couple hours before the stream, and he tweeted, "If you want to hear about the bitching, the infighting, and all the other things that didn't at Atheist Assemble, come join us in 2 hours on the Great Debate Community Channel." Now, I'm assuming that that's in reference to infighting and drama that happens maybe at other events we've heard about in the past. And, if you and Kelly first, go ahead, you, David, talk about like the atmosphere of the event and how it lacked these things that you say, the bitching and the infighting and what have you.
Go ahead, David.
Oh, is it me? Okay. I find that there's various different bits that have come from, say, so I've gone to a card at Skepticon a few years ago. There's various different things that have come forward that I'm still sort of learning about, and it was actually a very pleasant event. I sort of went into it expecting a lot more in terms of some tensions, because I'm not so well versed on the ex-Muslim community, and as such, it was sold as if there was like this had to be high security when Mimsy was talking to us on the phone and that sort of thing. And so there was, if maybe I was just exaggerating in my head that there would be an ever-present danger. Although I don't know whether I'm right to speculate as to the rumor. I don't know. I was probably sitting next to you, Kelly, when we were mentioning, apparently one person and their mother was having she was probably crying in toilets or something like that.
I never got to the bottom of it, but it would be wrong really to sort of comment on it. But she may have been at the event at, certainly not at the behest of her parents, considering what she was speaking about. But she was definitely at the event and became very upset and had to sort of excuse herself to the bathroom. So never got down to that. The atmosphere, it's I have no sort of basis for comparison to something like Britain's Forum or something like that. But it was very warm. There was a lot of laughter, given the the depth and the seriousness of the topics, there was still a lot of laughter, mainly because it was just all so bizarre what they felt they had to, they was expressing would be seen as a bad thing, and being demonized by people in their community or former communities, and how they consider themselves more moral people now, and things like that. So there was definitely a lot of humor and quite a bit of swearing. I was surprised because I was expecting it to be quite formal, and it wasn't. It was just like, these people who share this common goal and have very similar histories, albeit from different parts of the world. I think everybody on the panel had been were ex something, which obviously is handy, but maybe not Stephen Woodford though, because I don't really know much about his upbringing in terms of religion. But I know Alex was Catholic, good Catholic lad. But it was very warm, it's very welcoming, and I'd say it's one of those examples where there's life online and what goes on online, and then there's real life, and it was just so. The experience is just a completely different thing, even perhaps from streaming. Perhaps it was just conversations, exactly how they should occur, and it was wonderful. It was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Just happened to want it to go on longer. So, but I definitely recommend it. How it would change if it became larger in terms of the attendees, I don't know. But it was certainly very well organised, and just the sort of everything was kept to brief subjects as to keep it entertaining. So that definitely go again, just beyond, basically.
And so, and I think you and David both have said that maybe it needs to be a little longer next year then to give more time to interact with folks.
Yeah, for the I suppose for the fans or the attendees, and even really for the panelists, because they were kept their sort of responses and things had to be kept, quite succinct. And of course, they're passionate, and especially Armin. I think he had to be told like 30 seconds about 10 times, sort of thing. So it's nice to sort of had them be able to really be on their soapbox, I suppose. And then I suppose in regards to Faithless Forum, where people had a good amount of time to have something prepared and then speak, perhaps that's what's good about that. But given the time frame, it was still very, very wonderful and learned a lot.
So now, and this is for everybody, and we'll start with you, Kelly. What benefits do you see to events like these, where atheists, non-believers, can get together and share ideas?
I think again it comes down to the sort of the connectivity and the human aspect to it, because a lot of obviously people there. I mean, I knew David from having been on his channel and things like that. It's one thing to engage, discuss, and have a discourse online, and things obviously depending on subjects and topics can get very heated, even within people, as we've seen in the community. But these events are fantastic, not only because you're able to actually sort of see these people in person and they're centered around a particular topic, but also because they do remind you of the human aspect to it, and the resulting nature of what occurs when an idea gets put forth, or you hear about sort of the Atheist Republic doing this and the Atheist Republic doing that, but you get to hear about what's occurring. For example, I think it was Miriam's was talking about her. I don't think it was necessarily a charity, but it's an organisation set up to help ex-Muslims, and they get something like 600 calls, I think, from just the UK a month, I believe it was. So that's a lot of people that didn't have an outlet before. So you get to understand the nature of what they're doing a little bit in more detail, and the help that people can receive and how we can help. And you're led to it to be, I suppose, it seems that much more real, and it's something that you could perhaps get involved in and get your teeth into, as it's not just something on Twitter that then goes away. It's a little bit more corporeal, I suppose. It's there, it's raw, and it's just reminding you. It reminded me of why I wanted to do it. Not that I'd forgotten, but it gave me that extra push. I definitely
it makes it more of a tangible experience than just being
it
online.
Does, because, yeah, and I've made some wonderful connections with people, and we have wonderful discussions. But often I find, especially on Twitter, you know, I often think of myself, where is this leading? Are we changing minds, or are we ourselves, you know, being affected by what other people have to say? It's moving so fast, and it's, you know, a lot of information all at once. You know, what good are we doing? And then you get to these events and realize, well, I think it was even mentioned that social media probably isn't a good idea, but in terms of people who have no other outlet, it's a must. You know, it's a way to engage for safety for a lot of people, you know, in anonymity.
And I can say for myself, and I've shared this on other streams, I only come in contact with atheists online. You know, in the real world, everyone that I know and come in contact with are theists. And so, yeah, the online thing is all there is when it comes to speaking to like-minded people with regards to religion. And David, what do you see as the benefits of events such as these?
Well, to paraphrase you, the only time I come in contact with theists is online. So two different worlds, I suppose. I really appreciate that. I anticipated having known half the panel and not knowing the other half of the panel, which is mainly the ex-Muslim half. I know, I mean, Zara's been on my channel, and I've already been in one of Neil's after parties with Neil's 604 Atheist after parties with Armin. And as such, I can hear myself coming back. Have I got a little bit of feedback going on?
Yeah, there's been a little bit throughout the broadcast, but it's not really bothering the broadcast. Well, I'm not sure where it's coming from. But
okay, I blame Kelly just automatically. I mean, I know we've got headsets on. So sorry, yeah. So not knowing half the panel, it leaves it open to some familiarity but also something new. And so it felt like I got something new out of it that I didn't know before. I got particularly the emotion online doesn't come across, especially when it's being typed on Twitter. But when you're in person, you're seeing somebody actually getting, as I go back to what Sadia was saying, she was very emotive, to the point where she had a little moment with Miriam. I think it was like thanking her for what she had personally done for her. And everyone was like, oh, it was just a nice moment.
Yeah, and it was, she said that she'd never felt a sort of maternal connection, you know, so strong.
That was it.
With her own mother. And what did she say? Something about being embraced. She felt like she used a really beautiful term as well, almost like being cradled. You know, she felt that saved and, you know, protected and listened to, I suppose. And that you just think, oh, you know, I've got it good, you know. Yeah, so that was pretty telling. And again, it's these stories that might get conceptualized in a video, but there's something about hearing it, you know, from the person directly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in communication online versus communication in the real world. I mean, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but a certain, you know, sizable percentage of communication is visual cues and body language and things like that. So it does make the experience quite a bit different when you can do it in the real world. Dr. Misha, what do you, although you have not attended such an event, what do you see as the benefits of these type of events where non-believers can get together and share ideas?
Well, absolutely. I think that face-to-face communication, there's nothing like it. Hearing these stories coming out and people actually reaching out and understanding what the costs are to individuals. You know, I am gratified to hear from Kelly and from David that there were positive things to come out of this, and that there was a lot of good connections. And I hope it continues. Remember, there's a reason why church is every week. That's to inculcate. That is to make sure that everybody is staying in line. And when, atheists only meet up online, or they only see each other every once in a while, you kind of lose that excitement. And so I hope this continues.
Well, and to hear David and Kelly describe it, I can't see why they wouldn't make it an annual thing. It seems like it was a very, very big success.
Yeah.
And I would suggest to the organizers, and I hope that Faye is okay. Anger spread thin. She was going to be with us as one of the organizers of the event. But if any of the organizers are listening now, or if they, see this broadcast in the future, I would suggest that you have David and Kelly as speakers next year.
Well, I'd make a terrible event correspondent. Honestly, I was thinking today, I was trying to remember all the different topics that were covered and thinking, oh my God, I should have taken a notepad or something. But I think that it could do with that sort of thing, especially if it ends up being either a 2-day thing or a day-long event, and perhaps bigger and with more people attending, to have somebody sort of not live stream, but sort of live tweets what's going on. That would be quite fun.
Oh, well, I think even live stream thing would be cool to have, a YouTuber there at the event in real time. I think that would be awesome.
And have someone
I nominate you.
And have somebody moderating a tweet deck so that questions can be asked and comments made and then forwarded to the panel. That is really nice in seminars.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
So, is there any other aspects of this event that you, David and Kelly, would like to share? Is there, anything that kind of stuck out that besides what you've already mentioned that bears mentioning right now?
Alex turned up late. Cosmic Skeptic. It's easy to forget. He took a train to Birmingham, apparently, because the day before he was with GM Skeptic and Rationality Rules, and there are various sort of tweets saying there, or Instagram, whether in Portsmouth and in Cosmic Skeptic's podcast booth, so that obviously something might be released on his channel about that at some point, and then they got lost somehow. I'm not sure why, but he turned up halfway through his little segment. Yeah.
Well, he ended up taking a train ride that he didn't need to take, basically.
Yeah, literally in the opposite direction of where he needed to be. And it's and I got a little bit worried. It's like, oh my God, he's not going to make it. But he, he did try his best. And he actually sat down and was sort of asked the question, and they were still out of breath from running to get to the location. So that was quite funny. So it's not really drama, but it's a little bit of action in there. But Skeptic, almost didn't make it, sort of thing. But no, and he brought it. I mean, him and Stephen, I was particularly impressed with, because they gave, with their answers, always articulate and always sort of thoughtful and reasoned. But everyone on the panel brought something and allowed themselves not only to express their ideas, but their personalities as well. As we've spoken, on the internet and in the videos, we only get snippets of these things. So it just made the whole thing a little bit more personal, I think, for me as well. So no, it was wonderful. And it in the same format, it would be great in America, but Atheist Forum obviously has a good, sort of hold on that side of things over there. So
I guess many of us have missed our stop, or maybe gotten on the wrong train or bus before. At least you didn't say that he got caught in a roundabout for an hour and a half, unable to get out of it. But anything you want to add to what Kelly just said, David?
I was particularly. I thought those two were very consistent. I really liked both Jimmy and Sadia's contributions, they seemed to pitch it just right. As I said, he came across as Jimmy came across as very articulate, and Sadia came in with the right level of passion and emotion in her voice and what she was speaking about. And it really, again, going back to what we were saying, you don't quite get that when you're online or on their YouTube channel or whatever. You really have to be there in person to actually experience the back and forth, because they don't have time to really prepare a back and forth, especially when they're taking quick fire questions from each other as well. And that back and forth you don't necessarily always get. So it's definitely well worth attending these sorts of events.
So I think that now Kelly had let me know that she only had maybe about an hour. I think that we've covered the subject, as well as we can. Plus the fact that we were to have a couple other people here today that were unable to show up. That would have perhaps had the conversation go on a little longer. So I think what we'll do at this point, and since this is my first stream back in 2 weeks, I think we'll wrap things up here, and let everybody have a final word, and talk about their respective channels and where people can find them on social media. Let's start with Dr. Griffith. Your final words on this, or let us know where people can find you on YouTube and elsewhere.
Well, John, first off, I want to thank you for inviting me. I thought that was very kind of you, and I hope you had a great 2 weeks off. I can be found on Twitter at 3M Griffith, and our channel is History Unsettled. We haven't put out new content recently, but we are working on a very large production coming up. But I do want to thank Kelly and David for their report. It is really nice to hear of these things happening in the community.
And David.
I was just about to put your link in the description. And 2 seconds. That's I can't put web addresses in because I'm obviously not a mod. That's fine. I tried. So yeah, my own channel always goes by exactly the same name, David Worley, and my Twitter is WorleyDR. I'm sure just find us from the Great Atheist Community, Great Debate Community Twitter. Sorry, and I do long format podcasts with various different people. I've had Cosmic Skeptic on, Aaron Ross been on twice, Richard Carey's been on twice. And we do go into their specialist subjects, but we also talk about various different other things. So if you want to know what Lloyd Evans thinks about Brexit, or what Cosmic Skeptic thinks about gambling, and those sorts of things that you might not have heard of about them before, then come check it out.
And Kelly.
Well, it doesn't seem that long ago that I was last on here, so hopefully the people in the live chat won't get too bored with me. But yes, what I will just say is something that was expressed by Armin in particular. I think because we were all there, he was sort of not recruiting, but sort of just letting us know, get involved, be an activist if you can, every voice counts, is to, sort of follow them on Twitter, Armin Ababi, Cosmic Skeptic, Zara K, a lot of the people involved in the ex-Muslim thing. If you go to Twitter and put hashtag Atheists Assemble, it'll of course bring you up with the sort of the graphics of what occurred last night. So you get to see the other players involved, or the other panelists involved, and their work is well worth watching and getting a part of. So do sort of look into that, and of course Atheist Republic as well. But my channel is Topic Thunder, not Tropic Thunder. The YouTube search results do not like me, and I'm not changing it, damn it. So if you wanted to, I do all sorts of things. I'm sort of teaching more towards, I don't want to say general philosophy, but philosophy rather than just atheist based subjects.
I particularly like your skincare video.
I've taken that down. I thought, you know, I did that in a sort of, it was incredibly reactionary. I mean, I thought it doesn't really stick with the tone of the channel, so I've taken that off. But I'm glad you got to see it.
Well, my apologies. My apologies for bringing that up every time.
If you
I'm
do
learning,
want,
what is not worthy of my channel, but what I want to cover. And although I found it quite humorous, it doesn't really suit the tone of the rest of the things I talk about.
Yeah, if you do want to watch that particular video, or the topic at least, then she did come on my channel to discuss it. So that video is going nowhere.
With several sort of visual sort of descriptions of what was occurring, and a lot of them are very English terms, so you might need a interpreter in a sense.
Yes, is there a British thesaurus out there that translates terms into the English so that we, I oftentimes am confused sometimes when you Brits talk and some of the jargon you use. I'm learning some of it.
Professional translators say idioms are always the most difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, they told me I got it earlier. David was taking a piss earlier and kind of ragging on Kelly, and I know that's taking a piss, taking the piss,
your chain or something like that. So it's you've got to understand that if you can understand the context of how it's been said, but it's and it's a regional thing as well. There's people up north that will have sayings, there's people here that will have sayings, so it's all relative. Language is all relative.
Well, and it seems as if you and David have a north-south rivalry. He was pointing out that you are yours earlier.
She is incredibly jealous. I can't. I haven't provoked her in any way whatsoever.
The camaraderie within the community, it brings a tear to the eye, does it not?
So, all right,
anywhere north of where I am.
Thanks to Kelly.
Sorry, John, say that again. You asked me a question.
My thanks to I was going to say my thanks to Kelly, David, and Misha for being here today. I'm John. What's that? Oh, no, I didn't. No, I'm confused. No, I'm okay. My name's John Peterson. I have another channel called the Amateur Conversationalist that I started. And tomorrow, what happened now? Tomorrow I will be on. We're going to talk about. As a poet, and you'll find me here again next Saturday on the Great Debate Community Channel, and as well in the future I'm going to start doing a midweek stream on Nakasuchi's channel. Nakasuchi, formerly known as the Raging Atheist, changed his channel name to Nakasuchi just recently. He's trying to do away with. So I always try and end every one of these streams with and this week's quote is: "The essence of the independent mind lies not in what it thinks, but in how it thinks." Christopher Hitchens. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.